Hi, and welcome everyone to the 3PGC webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today, we have Rohini Ross with us. Rohini is going to talk about how getting comfortable being uncomfortable changed her life. Rohini is a psychotherapist, a leadership consultant, an executive coach, and a Huffington Post blogger. She facilitates trainings and personalized 3-day retreats for individuals, couples, and professionals to help them connect more fully with their true nature and experience greater levels of well-being, resiliency, and success. Rohini was first introduced to the principles during Michael Neill's Supercoach Academy in 2011. She then participated in a 4-day intensive with Linda Pransky that changed her life. Afterwards, she went on to complete the Pransky & Associate Mentorship Program in 2014. She's currently co-facilitating Solopreneur Mastermind Programs with Barb Patterson in addition to her 3P practice. Rohini lives with her husband of 23 years, Angus, and her 2 teenage daughters in Topanga, California, where she loves to hike with her dog, Bella. You can find out more about Rohini's work on her website, rohiniross.com, and that will be posted underneath the YouTube video for anybody who's listening afterwards. So thank you so much, Rohini, for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. You know, it's funny, Bonnie and I were speaking earlier this week because she's fabulous support for Barb and I on the Solopreneurs Mastermind, and it helped me see how far I've come because she said, I'll see you on Thursday. And I'm like, in my mind going, what's happening on Thursday? Because I was thinking about the Solopreneur Mastermind. And I'm like, what's happening on Thursday? And she's like looking at me because we're on Zoom. And she's like, what's the matter with this woman? Or that's what I imagined you were thinking, Bonnie. And I realized, and then she said, oh, the 3PGC call. Goodness. But previously, that would have been on the top of my mind probably for weeks ahead of time. So it's so nice to see the shift in myself in terms of being in the present moment and not sort of overthinking and worrying about things. So that was kind of refreshing. And it wasn't that I had forgotten about it completely. It's just I wasn't thinking about it in that moment. So welcome, everybody. I'm so grateful that you're all joining, and it just is such a gift to me to be able to share with you and be with you in this way. So I really look forward to the call being interactive with whatever's present for you and whatever you feel called to share. And Bonnie shared how to unmute yourselves. And I just encourage you to really listen lightly and to listen so that you can hear yourself and your own wisdom, because really that's the most important thing. And hopefully what I share will point in that direction, and hopefully it will be, a value and service in that way. But the most important thing is always going to come from inside of you. And so when I was thinking about this talk, my thoughts were like, what's been the most helpful for me? Because I know how much I've grown, how much my life has changed, how things have shifted for me. And I really started to think about, what's different now than before. And that's where the title came from, because I realized that really it's a very simple, small thing that's different now than before. In one way, simple and small, but in another way has huge implications and ramifications. So a little goes a long way with this understanding. And that difference is that I'm just a lot more comfortable, even with my discomfort. And that's been really freeing. So what I thought I would just give you a little bit of context. Some of you know me, some of you don't. So I'll just give you a little bit of context in terms of sort of where I've come from and sort of what that shift looked like for me, and then what the implications have been. So I think one of the most difficult periods in my life was when I was in my second year of college, and Angus he uses this term. He has all these lovely English terms that he uses. He would say, you had a turn then. So in my second year of college, I had a bit of a turn, and I got I got really scared by it. I got very depressed. Was after a car accident where I wasn't really seriously hurt at all, but it just really shook me up. And I found myself experiencing depression in a way that I had never experienced in my life. I felt suicidal, and I was just really scared by that whole experience. And it started this train of thinking for me that there was something wrong with me. And so that's when I sort of started to look for ways to fix myself. And one of the things that I'm very grateful for and was very helpful for me at the time is I started working with a psychiatrist at the college. And his approach, though, kind of reinforced that there were some things that were not right. But we didn't have time because I was just working with him for a couple of months. So his approach to say, I can support you, but those things that you're worried about fixing, like I can't help you with those because we don't have time, because he was a good Freudian analyst that, planned on probably 10 years with me to fix any of those things. So in a way, it was a blessing because I went away on my third year abroad and just kind of took my mind off of it. I was, the change, there was less pressure at school because it was just pass fail. So it sort of took my mind off of all of that, but it didn't really shake it off. And when I finally got into my master's program, I moved again and I started to get really anxious and really was not feeling myself. I went away during the summer to Guatemala and got really sick with some parasites during that time. So physically I wasn't well. So my mood just really dropped again. And it was like after I had gone down that train of thinking of really low mood depression, like it was as if I kept revisiting it. I just kept going back there. So I did all the good things, went to a naturopath, started working with a psychotherapist. But the thing that really had the most impact on me was I started this practice of Kundalini yoga and meditation. And it really helped me to get over myself, as I would say now, and to not go down all of those rabbit holes of thinking. But the trouble with that was it was so much work. Like I would get up, I was writing my thesis at the time, and I would get up at about, I think it was 4:30 in the morning. And I would go, because the ashram was next door to where I lived, and I would go and do 2.5 hours of yoga, meditation, chanting. And it was, it was a beautiful experience, but it wasn't really a way that I was going to stay sustained in my life and do that level of committed discipline. And even in that practice, it was still feeding my idea that I needed to fix myself. There were all these sort of kriyas that you could do for, depression or anxiety. So it's like you do these exercises and you fix these things that are not working inside of yourself. So, and that's how I heard it. I'm not saying that that's necessarily how it was meant, but that's how I was taking it inside. So even though I was, really in the yoga meditation, that was the first time that I deeply felt connected with something greater than myself, the intelligence behind life, my loving essence. Like I really did have that experience, and that was a real experience. But I thought I had to work to get there. And because I was a really good worker, and that was kind of how I navigated life, and it was a really great coping mechanism for me, it's like I'll just work really hard on experiencing that. Like I'll do all this yoga and meditation, and that's going to help me have more of that. But it doesn't really work that way. But I didn't know it at the time. And so, I just continued in this sort of interesting exploration of experiencing my true nature, but with this overlay of I have to improve myself to experience more of who I am. And I don't know, like now I'm like, how on earth did I think that? It just doesn't make any sense. But at the time, it just made all the sense in the world. And so then, I do a master's in spiritual psychology. Again, I'm deepening my connection with my true nature, having an experiential knowing of that, but still caught up in this misunderstanding that I need to improve myself. I need to fix my personality. I need to fix my neuroses in order to have more of that. And so I just kept going down that train of thinking. And when I eventually came across the principles, what was happening by going down that train of thinking, so there were ramifications for that. It was exhausting. That was probably one of the biggest negative side effects from that, is I really was wearing myself out trying to improve myself, which was not helping, because by being worn out, I certainly wasn't feeling my best self. And so one of the things, I'd become a licensed therapist, I was working, and I was feeling burnt out. And at the time, I didn't understand that it was coming from how I was relating to myself. I didn't understand how it was coming from the inside out. So I thought, oh, it's therapy. You know, it must be therapy. It's the clients that I'm working with. It's just, you know, really intense. So that must be why I'm feeling tired and exhausted and burnt out. And I don't know if I can keep doing this for the rest of my life. So a lot of my friends at the time were, you know, becoming coaches. And so I had this idea in my head, like, oh, being a coach, that must be easier than being a therapist. And, you know, that would probably be something that I could do and not feel burnt out, you know, completely outside in and not seeing it at the time. But I did a coaching training. I got certified. I did Michael Neill's Supercoach Academy. And in the one that I did, it was early on in his training, and he had one weekend on the principles. The rest of it was all other speakers from different, you know, points of view and trainings. But that one weekend that George and Linda came and spoke, I really was impacted by that. And what was really funny to me at the time is that I couldn't put my finger on what I'd been impacted by. Like, I knew I felt something, and I know enough to trust my wisdom, my intuition when it speaks to me. So I listened to it, but I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I didn't really know what was going to shift for me, but I knew it felt right. And so I just kept sort of staying in the conversation. But I did with the principles what I'd done with all of these other understandings at the beginning. I thought, oh, this understanding is what's going to help me fix myself. This understanding is going to help me to change these character traits that I didn't like in myself. And so even though I was feeling the pull, and I definitely felt good and right, I was still putting it in my conceptual box of this is a tool that I'm going to use to get rid of these things I don't like about myself, to put it very kind of bluntly and simply. And so even though it felt right, there wasn't massive transformation, because I was still in the same state of mind. I hadn't had sort of fresh thinking really come in and shift things for me. And that's why I say to you, you know, really listen to what your wisdom is saying, because that's what's most important. And then, you know, and it's funny to me because there was obviously enough there for me to keep moving forward, because I started to have a conversation with Barb Patterson about the mentorship program. And as an opportunity showed up, before doing the mentorship program, she said to me, Rohini, we have an opportunity. We need a client to come up and work with someone that's doing the mentorship training with Linda. Would you be willing to come up as a client? And that way you get to have an experience of, you know, what the program's like a little bit. Excuse me. And I thought, yeah, that's a great idea. So I went up there, and that's when the idea that somehow I could use this understanding to fix myself totally got blown out of the water by Linda and Leila, who I was working with. And it didn't take much. So it's amazing how, with the openness and the willingness, it's amazing how easy it is for fresh thinking to come in. And it's also amazing how that's completely not within our conscious control to make it happen. So what happened to me was I went in there and said to, you know, my intention was to feel less insecure. I was had a leadership role in a behavioral health company at the time, and there were 3 leaders, and the other 2 leaders, neither one of them were willing to do any of the public speaking requirements of the job. And I was somewhat willing, and I did kind of enjoy it on one level, but I also found it terrifying. And it was really hard because I would just beat myself up. I would beat myself up ahead of time. I would beat myself up afterwards, even if objectively the feedback I was getting was good, I still didn't feel good after doing these things. And I was having to do more and more of them. And I'm like, oh, this really is not fun. So I went in there with this intention to have less of an experience of being insecure. And what shifted, and I'm going to say what I heard, this may or may not have been what Linda said, and what shifted this for me probably means nothing to you. So it's not like the words or what I saw probably means anything to anyone else, but it was what I needed to see for myself. And it's what allowed me to let go of a lot of, stop identifying with a whole bunch of thinking. But what I saw was completely different than how I'd been holding my learning orientation, my growth orientation, because I really thought that by having a deeper understanding of the principles, that would change these qualities in myself. Like somehow, and how I see it now, it's like I thought that my spiritual nature would just start to take over, and my personality and my humanness would somehow just, start to vanish. I think really that's what I was trying to do. I didn't really think about the implications of that's not very good. But what I saw in that moment, and I can't remember exactly how I described it to Linda, but what helped me see it, she said, Rohini, you're not going to find your well-being in your distress. And so I had this image that what would happen when I would get insecure about these talks, or when I was feeling insecure about after giving a talk, is I would get all stirred up in my thinking and really identify with all of these thoughts, and they would look real to me. But then I would layer on top of that an extra layer of judgment, judging myself for feeling the way that I was feeling, making myself wrong for feeling the way that I was feeling, and thinking that I should be able to, in that moment, experience my true nature and experience my well-being, and that there was something wrong with me that I couldn't do that's what I needed to fix. And all she said to me was something along the lines of, that's not going to work. You can't do that. That's never going to work. You're never going to find your well-being in your upset. And it doesn't matter, because you're always going to come back to your well-being. That is natural. You don't need to work at that. That's not something that's on you. That's not something you need to use a technique for. That's not something that requires effort on my part. And I heard it not just here, it just hit me in a way that I saw something that allowed me to stop putting this pressure on myself and stop trying in a way that I didn't even see that I was trying at that point. And what happened, which really had a profound impact on me, is that I just let go of that idea that I needed to find my well-being in my unhappiness. But it wasn't like it was this little idea, like it was a massive amount of pressure that I've been putting on myself. And as soon as I saw that wasn't going to work, and I saw that it wasn't my job to do that, I just took the pressure off of myself. It just happened. And when that happened, I felt a level of peace, a level of quietness in my mind that I hadn't experienced previously, that was just so blissful and reassuring. And just, I knew that I was okay. And I knew that it didn't matter how distressed I got on the emotional level. I saw that I was still okay, and that the two don't really have anything to do with each other. And I was thinking about this morning, and I was thinking about how, in psychology, they talk about parent-child attachment. And I'm not going to say it exactly right, but the idea is that children that have a good attachment with their parents, they feel comfortable being not with their parents, even at a young age or when they're teenagers. need to sort of leave the nest. And I realized like, oh, that gave me an experience of connection with my well-being that allowed me to be okay, even I couldn't have any experience of my well-being in the moment. That there was a level of knowing that I had inside of me that didn't mean that I had to have this idea that I needed to feel it all the time in order to be okay. It's kind of like I was the little baby that would cry every time the mom left the room. Like every time I lost my well-being, I'd like, freak out. No, this isn't good. And what all that shifted, and it's so simple, is that it's like, oh, it's going to come back. I'm going to re-experience my well-being. In fact, it's not even that it's not there. I just can't feel it right now. And it doesn't matter that I can't feel it right now. That was the freedom for me. In the knowing that my okayness is there, even if I can't see it, feel it, taste it, smell it in that moment. So, in terms of my mind, that quietness, I think it was on some level somewhat of a peak experience. But I also think a part of it is that I just got used to more quiet in my mind. So it just felt normal. So what felt like kind of like blown away, like after a few days, it's like, oh yeah, this is normal. So, I don't know which is which on that level, but I think it's a combination of both. So it created a sustainable change. It's something that hasn't gone away from that moment. And it doesn't mean that I'm not human. It doesn't mean that I don't have my low moods, my insecurities, like all of my human experience. And even I think the freedom actually allowed me to stop monitoring myself so much, and to stop trying to be so good and perfect. And perhaps, and Angus is muted right now, so Bonnie, keep him muted. But perhaps, even not be as nice as I was previously in a way. And to not intentionally, and I'm obviously not advocating for that, but to really have the humility and the willingness to allow myself to be wherever I'm at and to just do my best. And I think overall, taking the pressure off myself does allow me to show up more in a more loving, caring, compassionate way. But I do think that I'm more comfortable with the full range of my human experience. And so I get to see more of it. And I sometimes express more of it, but I'm also more compassionate and kind with myself, I think, in that process, which has made a significant difference. And that little tiny, realization impacted every single area of my life. There's not one part of my life that didn't look differently as a result of seeing that. And I'll just speak a little bit to that, and then I'm happy to answer any questions or listen and hear how this is impacting all of you, or what thoughts you might have to share around this. But when I saw things differently, when I saw that I wasn't broken, when I saw that my human experience wasn't an indicator of something being wrong with me, it allowed me to be with what is in a much more accepting and compassionate way. It also allowed me to not take a lot of my negative thinking so seriously, because it looked less on point than it did previously. And so what that meant is, like, in terms of my relationship with Angus, it meant that I could see when he was upset. And again, there's no perfection with this. I'm not saying this is all the time, but more often I could see that him being upset and in his low mood in that moment didn't mean that he wasn't going to come back to himself again. And I didn't need to get scared when he wasn't himself. Just like I didn't need to be scared when I wasn't myself. It allowed me to have room for other people to not be themselves in a way that I didn't have room for. And in terms of my kids, to have room for them to have their own emotional experience without sort of feeling like there was something wrong with them. Or if I did feel like there was something wrong with them, I kind of remember at some point, like, this is just part of the human experience. And so it, as a byproduct of seeing that, there's less conflict. Because if I'm not so scared when Angus isn't himself, I'm much less likely to try and fix the situation in the worst possible time to try and fix the situation. I'm much more likely like, oh, whatever, not a big deal, and just write it out. And then, you know, things, he miraculously, like all of us, comes back to his true nature, or our kids naturally come back to their true nature. And it's, you know, it's amazing. And I'm so grateful that our girls are in their teenage years. So I'm so grateful to see this during this time. In work, the talks, I could actually be less self-involved and less self-monitoring, and actually be more present to the people that I'm connecting with, and to be just much less self-conscious in that process, that actually allowed what I was doing to be far more effective. In terms of work in general, I just got much better at being able to follow my inclination that seemed like a good idea at the time, and less willing to let any of the negative chatter derail me from that process. Or I didn't tend to get derailed from the process. I've always been pretty good at knowing what my intuition is saying to do and doing it. But it was so much harder before, because it would be really having to overcome this fear, overcome this hard emotional experience. So the emotional experience just tended to be much less of a bother, or not even there. Like when I'm talking to Bonnie about what's happening on Thursday, not even thinking about it. So just kind of, and I was blown away, because for me, I was committed that, you know, success was a result of hard work. And like, oh my goodness, things happen without a lot of effort, and things happen that I have absolutely no control over happening. And wow, isn't that how my business has grown? Isn't that how things have become more successful for me, by just following that inclination and acting on it, and taking the simple next step, and not some dramatic effort of will. So that was like a real surprise to me. And my health, you know, as a natural byproduct of having less stress and anxiety in my mind, it's amazing what the impact that has on overall general health. So, you know, really, George Pransky's words of, what does he say? He said, "Oh, all boats rise with the tide." Like, that's really what I saw. And so what I'm really pointing to, like, that's my experience. But what I'm pointing to for all of you is to see how that natural expression of your true nature, who you are, wants to come forward, and that it's there for us, and that it's going to reveal itself in whatever ways it reveals itself to you. And it comes with a good feeling. And we all have insights all the time. They might be little ones, they might be massive, big ones, but to see that that's just our natural state. It's just our natural state. And to me, there's just an ability, as I see that more and more, to just really trust that. And it's, you know, it's not like, when I say natural state, I mean that is you. The intelligence behind life is you. It's me. It's all of us. It's everything. And there's no escaping it. So we can't really get in our own way. And the more I see that, and I want to point to that, is the more it allows me to experience that, but also to know within my human experience that even if I can't feel it, like I said earlier, it's still me. I'm no different. Just my experience of where I'm at in that moment is different, but I actually haven't changed. And so this is all of us, every single moment of every single day. And we just go in and out. understanding that. And so what I saw was that, when I did that intensive with Linda, what I saw was I was trying to manage my consciousness and my understanding going up and down. I was trying to, make sure like it never went down, and that's just not possible. And it doesn't matter. That's the good news. So that feels like a good point to allow some interactive communication here. So as Bonnie said earlier, you're able to unmute yourself by pushing on the mute button on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And so whoever would like to share, please do. Oh,
I'll go ahead.
Thank you, Darren.
So one thing that really resonated with me, and I had a little epiphany when you were talking, was the idea of this model of attachment and the attachment of the mother and child. And I realized when you said that not only was I not attaching to my well-being, which you don't have to, it's already there, I was attaching to my problems. And so even when I would let go of my problems or see them as something that is a layer over my well-being, I would think that I then had to turn to the right and attach to my well-being. And so when I thought about the child and attachment, I thought about a little child lost in a store, and how when the parent, when the child turns around and their parent's gone and they suddenly are in terror, but their parent's probably 2 aisles over, but they don't realize it. And I thought that's what came to me when you talked about well-being, is that we forget. Right? We don't realize it's 2 aisles over. It's right there. It's there all the time. And I think that's the transition I'm making right now, is this mechanical process of remembering my well-being versus really knowing it. And that, so just something came to my mind that the problems come and go and they're there, and that the well-being is always there, but it's I don't have to attach or detach from anything. But that's like another layer I'm still delving into.
That's beautiful, Darren. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
Who else would like to go?
I'd like to.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Where'd you go? There you are. You just jumped on the screen.
One thing that jumped out at me about what you were saying was the knowing that your partner or your children or your friends, that they are also going to be okay. That, yeah, we get in our funks, but their well-being is also 2 aisles over. And what has been really challenging for me is, like, that's an awesome reminder to remind myself. And I'm having a real challenge relating to people who don't know that about themselves, or who are, who haven't made that discovery about themselves and are still like looking outside for like, how do I get okay? And for me, it's so hard to be like, well, you are okay. And they're like, I am not effing okay right now. Okay. And I'm like, you just don't know it yet. And they're like, shut the hell up. Like, what? And I am having like that. This is my biggest challenge. I have noticed and witnessed in myself tremendous equanimity and tremendous growth in terms of just relating to myself and knowing that I'm okay. And so with that ease and grace that I've experienced for myself, I'm like super frustrated when it's not easy for someone else. And so, yeah, I would love, you are familiar with my dogs. I would love to hear anyone's insight on how they relate to others.
Well, I'll share a little bit, and if anyone wants to say anything, they can. But I wonder if there's sort of an opportunity for just seeing more for yourself that you're okay even when someone else isn't okay. Because that wasn't easy for me, that I would get scared, or I would get uncomfortable inside when someone else wasn't okay, and would feel like my well-being was dependent on them being okay. And so when I saw for myself more clearly that I absolutely can be okay, and that actually allowed my heart to open more and to have compassion for whoever wasn't feeling okay in the moment, rather than sort of and I also hear what you're saying. It's like when I saw this for me, it's like, you want to share it with the world. Of course you want to share it with the world. You want everybody to be okay. And you know how easy and on one level it is. But everybody, like I said, has their own timing in terms of where they're at, myself included. And so I just, that's what comes forward for me, to just sort of see if there's more to see for yourself around your own well-being, independent of what's going on with the other people. Does that make sense? I see you're muted again.
It does make sense. It's just, it's definitely tricky navigating this, this knowing, and in a world of people who are still finding it. Like it, you know, that, yeah, that's tricky for me.
I hear you.
I'd like to share
Thank you, Rachel.
I'd like to share something, and in full disclosure, Rachel's my daughter. And my relationship with you has been such a beautiful lesson in that, because the more for you and for my clients and for my friends, the more I hold the remembering that when people discover their own insights, that the shift, the change, the realization is so much more powerful than any information that I can give them. In fact, the minimal conversation that we've had over the last several weeks when you've been, having some health challenges compared to how it was in the past. And I just kept on knowing that it was your path, and I really had no idea what the direction answers were, and that you would find them in the perfect time.
Thank you, Ellen. Is there anything else you want to share, Ellen? Are you done?
Just gratitude, Rohini, for you and bringing this forward. And the new awareness for me around this is how tricky my thinking continues to be. Again, so aware of this part of myself that is so masterful at protecting me from negative thinking or worried thinking, and it'll go to so many extremes to do that, to anchor in the positive. And I remember you saying to me one day, you're not your positive thoughts or your negative thoughts. And that was so deeply shifting for me. And yet there's still this, I'm still on the curve of learning that.
Yeah, I think we all are.
Yeah, and as I said that, I was like, of course I am.
Learning we're not the content of our thinking. I'm certainly learning that one too.
Yeah. Or that, there's nothing to protect myself from, or hide myself from, or minimize, or change, or manage. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
I'm going to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. short thank you for working with my daughter, Rohini. Thank you very much. While I'm listening to you, I'm a little overwhelmed and a little bit like it's difficult like to actually verbalize. So there is part in me, and I'm just so happy to see Alan. It's a complete attachment to Alan. So there is part in me that I want to cry because it feels so true. And then there is, I just want to drill it down for me, please. And then there is part that comes up. Like it's almost this double talk in my head that the source of me not being in my well-being somewhere else. You know, it's almost like it's such a fight inside where I had huge changes and shifts through the work with Alan. There are some just, I can't put it in words, the shift in Yule. And as you say, nothing is perfect, but the level how we can communicate and how we understood each other through the stress, where I said like, you know what, I was yelling in response to me being upset with myself as, you know, whatever I was judging. And she was like, yeah, good, I got it. But your middle son doesn't get it, okay, yet. So either it's my ego fighting, that's my thinking raises up in response to somebody else's action. That just feels true to me for now. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah. So when you started sharing, Olga, I felt like when you said I could cry right now, like I just felt you. And then, you know, you mentioned there's these other thoughts that just have a different feeling to them. So it's almost like just recognizing that, you know, you can just set your compass to stay with that feeling that feels so beautiful. And, you know, again, this might sound like a technique or advice, but it's just for me, I see that I don't pay attention so much. And it's coming from a realization. So it's not a technique. It's just coming from seeing that, oh, I can trust that beautiful feeling inside of me. And I can listen to that. And I don't have to tune into these other thoughts that are there so much. Doesn't mean I don't, like you said, like I say, we all say there's no perfection, but there's I just give them less airtime because it just doesn't make so much sense. And there's so much there in that beautiful feeling and knowing it's alive. And it's going to share with you whatever you need to hear.
Okay.
Rohini,
Thank you. Yeah.
are you able to see the chat? If not, I can read them to you. You have a couple.
Could you, I don't think I have them up. Yeah.
Okay, so Winston asked, when you tell someone you're a transformational coach and they ask, what is that? What do you do? How do you respond?
When I tell someone I'm a transformational coach, how do I respond? Well, you know, it's so context driven. I mean, oftentimes when I'm speaking with people about that, they're calling me or they're connecting with me because they want help with something. And so usually what I do is find out more about what it is they're struggling with, and then use that as the context to explain how I work with people. I guess if it was a situation where I'm like sitting on a plane next to someone, they say, what do you do? I would just, again, in the moment, tune into what makes sense to share with them and say something along the lines of, you know, I really help people to experience their true nature more fully so that they can be more successful in the world, and then kind of see where they go with that and really respond to what they might be struggling with, where they might not see how that makes sense, and have it be very interactive in that way. Winston, are you here? Are you able to? Oh, there you are. Does that make sense to you?
That does make sense. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And there's one more.
Okay.
Vaselka, I hope I said that correctly. Rohini, I find myself realizing the truth of knowing that the well-being is a constant, Only living this truth takes hold on the opposite end of the truth. And I engage, just popped up, and I engaged in a self-destructive behavior as smoking, for example, or apathy for life, period, in knowing that well-being is ...
Was that a question? I'm not sure. Or is it an observation? Are you on who was that?
Vaselka?
Vaselka, are you on?
See if I can unmute her. Vaselka, I just unmuted you if you can.
Oh, hi, Rohini. I just had a tearful moment.
Aw. Are you okay? You don't have to speak. I just wasn't quite clear in terms of if there was a question.
It's like taking that truth of knowing that the well-being is a constant and it's always there and available. I just go ahead and pick up another cigarette and say, everything's cool anyways.
And
who cares?
And is there any...
And I'm still okay. And I'm, if I die, I'm great. I maybe even prefer that.
But is there a part of you that doesn't want to smoke? Is that part of what you're... Okay.
Yes.
So it's like, yes, you see this, but you're still smoking and don't like that.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that comes from knowing that well-being is always mine.
Well, I think that what I've seen is that sometimes in the really feeling the well-being, the first experience that I have is that I stop judging my bad behaviors, and doesn't mean I stop doing them. And so, and I'm saying bad in quotation marks because you're saying you don't want to smoke, but it's like the beauty of this wisdom that we have inside of us is if I have a real intention around something, like if I really want to shift something, that it's like I point my intention, I point my mind in that direction, and information comes forward. So it's like I don't need to not be in my well-being to change a behavior. In fact, the more I'm in my well-being, if I really open to doing something differently, then new thinking comes in around that and guides me in that process as to what might work. And then, sometimes we just get a little inclination and we take that next step and see how that goes. And then it's in the doing of that we get more information. And so if you genuinely want to shift that behavior, my sense would be that your connection with your well-being and not judging yourself in the moment and taking the pressure off of yourself is a great foundation. And then to allow what your innate wisdom has to share with you in the timing that it shares with you about what might support you in making those changes. Does that make sense?
Yes, the pressure off allows me to pick up another cigarette.
Well, you see, sometimes it's like the behavior takes a little time. It's like it's serving a purpose. Even though there's a downside to it, there's a benefit to it as well, or else you wouldn't be doing it. So like any coping mechanism that, I think we all have our coping mechanisms, they serve a purpose. But when we start to see that we can have more of our well-being independent of them, it's easier to let it go. And so it's like, I firmly believe that if that's a clear intention inside of you, and if you're connecting more deeply with your well-being, it's going to get easier and easier at some point to feel like, I don't need that coping mechanism, or maybe I just don't need it in this moment. Maybe you have it in another moment, but it just more gets revealed. And I don't know if you've read Amy Johnson's book, The Little Book of Big Change. Is that something you're familiar with?
Ellen just, Ellen's.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it's a wonderful book about habits, and I highly recommend it. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Who else? Stacy?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me? I'm also in a loud coffee shop,
I can hear you.
I have 2 minutes.
Okay.
But I
No
was going
pressure
to
on me.
say, yeah, no, I was going to say too, in terms of coping mechanisms, I know I used to see drinking as a really horrible thing that I would do. And I mean, not drinking to excess or anything, but because of my own health, if I have alcohol, just one or two drinks, it could really impact how I'm feeling the next day. And I remember having a talk with you where you were like, maybe right now we don't have to decide, hey, you can never drink again, but you can make that decision in the moment. And you'll always know in the moment, based on your own well-being, whether or not this is the right decision for you. And you don't, it was my coping mechanism always to be like, I'm never drinking again, or I'm never doing this again. And I've come to realize that in the moment, I always make the right decision. Like, oh, I think that this is okay today. And, maybe I'm not feeling very good today. This is not the right decision for me. And so that's kind of what came up for me when she was talking about it. I'm sure we all have things very similar.
Thank you,
And
Stacey.
now I have to go.
Okay. Have a good day at work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Rohini. This is Christy.
Hi, Christy.
Hi. Rohini, the thing that just keeps coming back, even in this moment, what you said about that, I wrote it down in the words that, in the way I heard it, but that my well-being is not dependent on theirs. And I can see even how in the nuances of being my own coaching journey, in the conversations of just how much that can kind of slip in, just even the slightest bit of what I may have in the past called over responsibility or so forth. You had named it. But what I really appreciated you talking about, because it's something that's been very present for me this week, is about the self-monitoring part, about the, I don't know if you said about the consciousness going up and down, like that self-monitoring. I didn't realize that was what I was doing. At the same time, I appreciated in this moment that that's just been a part of my 3P journey. Like that's just, it's like I see something new and then I start paying attention to that new thing a lot. But that can be a bit of that reflection, at least the way that I've been experiencing it, that self-monitoring. It's just like I'm noticing the noticing and the noticing, and then there's more noticing. And in kind of in relationship or in conjunction with the up and down. So it's I appreciated that you were saying that, and I could listen from a neutral place to hear someone else say that. Like, and that's just one of the benefits of webinars like this, is to just be able to relax, and how you had started out saying, like, listen lightly. And when you said that was what struck for me, because this past week, the unrecognized thoughts have now become more recognized. And it's one of those, it's like, oh my goodness. And I've known that they were unrecognized, and now I hear them. And that's just kind of the place I went into with respect to the self-monitoring. So I appreciated hearing it at a little bit with more altitude. That's essentially the takeaway that I have from that. And I just go, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, okay, next, or move on, or what's in this moment, as opposed to the overthinking habit I have had about my thinking. It's completely normal given, for me. So
fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Hi, Rohini.
Hi, James.
Hi. I think for me with it all at the moment is it's when you see somebody, like, they self-correct themselves, but they don't even know they've done it. You know, going from like what Rachel says with what you said about you trying to explain it, and then they're just like, but I have a problem right now, and then suddenly they go, anyway. I need to go and do something else. And you're like, you have just self-corrected yourself, but you don't even know you've done it. And that's what I just find really fascinating with this, that I'm starting to notice it. And my wife has just literally just started a new business, and she had one evening where she just felt completely swamped. She's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And I didn't say anything. I just watched. And then the next morning, flash of inspiration. This is what I need to do. And that's what fascinates me at the moment. Just seeing how people change, and they don't even know they're actually doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So reassuring, isn't it, to know that that's our natural design to regulate that way.
It is. Helps encourage me as well. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
If I can just comment on that, I thank you so much for sharing that, because it's true. It's like, if we just hold space for people to do their own shit, then they do. and it's funny, because I'm realizing that I judge my partner as always jumping to the negative conclusion, and I do that about him. I'm like, well, he's never gonna get this. So yeah, thank you for that perspective.
Thanks, Rachel. So I think we have time for another one. Bonnie, if there's another thought or question out there.
I have one.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question, but like when in the earlier part of your sharing, I got like this painful realization that me stepping more and more into the true principles now, and the way I hold it is like, oh, how can I fix my thinking? How can I, because like part of me thinks there's something really wrong with my very active mind, or when I get obsessive about a thought, and then so just kind of like hit me, oh, maybe I'm approaching it slightly wrong. And something around that, like one of my friends posted this thing on Facebook this week, that a thought that we keep repeating becomes a belief. And realized a lot of things about my belief system around that. So I don't know, I don't know if there's a question here, but I do sense, and maybe other people that went on this path, that part of me think I need to fix my thinking. And I know it's a thought, and it may not be relevant at all, but it was kind of like it hit me when you shared about the fixing part.
Yeah, well, I mean, me too. It's exactly what I did as well. And I think perhaps it's just a natural kind of progression to think, oh, my feelings come from my thoughts, and if I just manage all my thinking, then I can feel good all the time. But it's just for me, what I saw is it's such a hard, pressured way to go. It doesn't work, because what's so much easier is to realize that the content of my thinking doesn't matter. Even the quality of my mood, how I'm feeling, doesn't matter, really. It's going to always be up and down and all over the place. And so the less I pay attention to that, the less I'm bothered by that, I get to experience more and more what's behind all of that. But it's what you're sharing, Joy, it's like you've seen something. That's the most important thing. As far as I'm concerned, it's like whatever you've seen, and it sounds like you might be judging yourself a little bit too. So I encourage you to be gentle and kind with yourself, but just to trust that you've seen something, and to allow that to reveal whatever it wants to reveal to you, because this is inside of you, and your knowing is going to come forward, and however it wants to come forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that has anything they'd like to ask or share? Someone did type into the chat to ask how they can get the recording of this. I said it's so beautiful. They liked the recording, and just for anybody who might be on the phone or who can't see the chat window, there is a 3PGC YouTube channel, and these get posted on usually by the end of the same day that they're recorded. And also, if you go to 3pgc.org, there is a free member sign up in the upper left-hand corner of the page where you can get on the newsletter list. And every Friday we send out a blast of what's coming up and a link to what's been recorded. So just wanted to add that since there was a little bit of conversation about that. So, gosh, this was really wonderful. The fastest hour. It's gone so quickly. Really lovely. Is there anything else you'd like to say before?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to show up. That's, really a blessing to me. And I just, hope it's been supportive for you. So thanks, everyone.
And I want to thank everyone who joined us live as well, and for anybody who listens later on YouTube. And the next 3PGC webinar is on May 25th. Same time, same channel. Well, no, not same channel, not same Zoom link. But if you sign up on the 3PGC news list, you'll get the Zoom link. And on May 25th, we have Paul Locke with us, and he's going to talk about, have you got a hidden talent? So looking forward to that as well.
That's going to be a good one. I love Paul Locke. He's just such great energy. So I encourage everyone to show up for Paul too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.